No one saved the millionaire's son who fell into the sewer. Only the poor cleaning lady jumped in. The rain crashed down on the city that Monday afternoon, furious and unrelenting, as if determined to swallow everything in its path. The cobblestone streets of Riverside Heights, an upscale residential community, had turned into narrow rivers, the current swirling violently, froth spilling over. Wind whipped through the trees, leaves scattered across the ground, thunder roared, blending with desperate screams. "Help! Someone, please save Ethan!" The cry split through the chaos, trembling with terror. He was only 6 years old. Ethan Miller, the only son of Jonathan Miller, a prominent attorney who lived in the luxurious penthouse of Tower A. Ethan had just returned from school, his backpack hanging loosely from his small shoulders when his foot slipped on the slick pavement. The storm had ripped the cover off a storm drain, leaving a gaping black hole like a death trap in the middle of the walkway. In a split second, Ethan lost his balance and fell straight into the darkness. The icy water swallowed his tiny body whole. Ethan thrashed wildly, his fragile arms slapping against nothingness. Filthy water rushed into his mouth and nose, choking him, making him cough violently, his terrified eyes searching desperately for a saving hand. "Oh my God, he's going to die. Call the fire department, quick!" a woman screamed, her voice cracking with panic. Residents crowded around the drain, their aristocratic faces, people who were used to solving problems with money, now pale and trembling. They were not accustomed to real danger. With each passing second, the current dragged Ethan further, his small figure slipping away beneath the flood. A man stammered, Who would go down there? It's too dangerous. What if we fall too? I can't even swim." The words hung in the air, but no one stepped forward. Meanwhile, Ethan kept struggling, his cries for help growing weaker. Strength drained from his little body. He tried to cling to a narrow pipe, but the cold water and mud made his grip slip again and again. His frantic eyes widened, his lips trembling as he whispered, "Daddy." The sight wrenched at every heart watching, but fear held them rooted in place. Second by second, minute by minute, Ethan's chance of survival was being washed away with the rushing flood. The water kept rising, and soon it would be impossible to find the boy in that darkness. At that moment, a young woman ran over, wearing the green uniform of a staff worker and carrying a cleaning bucket, which she dropped immediately upon seeing what was happening. Sophia Ramirez, 24 years old, small, thin, yet possessing a courage that demanded respect. She had been working as a janitor in the condominium for several years and had known Ethan since he was little. Every time they crossed paths in the hallway, he would wave and smile at her. "Move aside," she shouted, her voice sharp and commanding, so unlike her usual quiet demeanor. The crowd flinched back. Some tried to stop her. "No, you'll die down there. The current is too strong. It's dangerous." But Sophia ignored everything else. She kicked off her shoes and dove into the drain without a second thought. The cold water hit her like a punch. The current was stronger than she expected, but she managed to keep her balance. "Ethan! Ethan! I'm here!" she shouted as she swam against the flow. Filthy water splashed into her eyes and mouth. The taste was horrible, but she didn't stop. Ethan was clinging to a pipe about 8 meters ahead, right where the sewer split. "Miss Sophia, help me." Ethan's voice was weak. He held on to whatever he could, struggling to keep his head above the water. "Hold tight! I'm coming!" Sophia pushed with all her strength. Her soaked clothes dragged her down, heavy and cumbersome. But she didn't give up. By the time she reached him, the boy was nearly fainting from fear. "Come here, give me your hand. Hold on to my neck." Ethan clung to Sophia as if she were the only thing keeping him alive. And indeed, she was. Without her, he would have drowned in that filthy torrent. The way back was even harder. Sophia had to swim upstream, carrying Ethan, who was shivering from cold and terror. More than once she thought she couldn't make it, but something inside pushed her to keep fighting. As they neared the opening of the drain, the residents erupted into applause. A few climbed down to help pull them both up. Sophia climbed out first, then lifted Ethan into waiting arms. The boy was drenched, filthy, and trembling, but alive. Sophia was just as soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her uniform covered in mud, but her eyes shone with relief. "It's over, Ethan. You're safe now." She hugged the boy close, checking if he was breathing properly, if he had any injuries. Slowly, Ethan opened his eyes, and the first thing he did was smile at Sophia. "Thank you, Miss Sophia. You saved me." The crowd broke into applause. Some wept, others lowered their heads in shame, recalling how they had stood frozen, watching a child nearly drown. In that moment, no one cared about gossip, status, or class. They only saw a small woman who had risked everything to save the son of a stranger. Just then, a black car screeched to a halt at the gate. A tall, elegant man rushed out. It was Jonathan Miller, Ethan's father. He had been on his way back from a meeting when he received the desperate call from the manager. "Ethan, my son!" Jonathan ran over, his face pale with fear. "There was an accident, Mr. Miller, but he's safe now," Mrs. Margaret said. "This young woman saved your boy." Jonathan looked at Sophia for the first time. He saw a humble, modest young woman, still dripping from the sewer, yet cradling his son with the tenderness of a mother. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked, still struggling to process what had just happened. "Sophia, sir. Sophia Ramirez. I work here in the building." You saved my son." Jonathan's voice broke. He couldn't understand why a modest worker had risked her life for his child, while dozens of wealthy residents had only stood by and watched. The wail of ambulance sirens echoed down the street. Ethan, still dazed, clung to Sophia, and everyone knew he needed to get to the hospital. At the hospital, Ethan was rushed straight into the emergency room. Sophia was about to leave, but Jonathan gently held her hand. "Please stay. He might need you." "Jonathan, I'm a mess. A hospital isn't the place for me." "Of course it is. You saved my son. That gives you the right to be anywhere." Sophia stayed, sitting with Jonathan in the cold hallway. Her clothes were still soaked, but she didn't care. All her worry was for Ethan. An hour later, the doctor came out, Dr. Howard Grant, a middle-aged man with a seasoned look. "The boy is stable. He was badly frightened, but he didn't swallow much water. We'll monitor him for a few hours, then he can go home." "Thank God," Jonathan exhaled in relief. "But there's another matter. Ethan lost his mother recently, didn't he?" "A year ago. A car accident," Jonathan replied, clearly pained. "Then he's still coping with that loss. A 6-year-old losing his mother so young is at high risk of trauma. Today's accident may trigger those memories. He'll need emotional support in the coming weeks." A nurse appeared. "The boy's awake and asking for Miss Sophia." Jonathan and Sophia exchanged glances. This was the first time Ethan had asked for her so specifically. "Go see him," Jonathan said. "Please." Sophia entered the room softly. Ethan was lying on the bed, pale but conscious. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Miss Sophia, you stayed?" "Of course, I won't leave you." The boy opened his arms. Sophia went to him, and Ethan hugged her tightly, afraid she might go. "I dreamed I was drowning again. You came and pulled me out." "It was just a nightmare. You're safe now." Jonathan stood at the door, watching. There was something profoundly natural in the way Sophia cared for Ethan. She didn't coddle him, nor treat him like a baby. She respected him while being tender. "Miss Sophia, will you stay with me until I fall asleep?" "Of course, sweetheart." She began telling him a small story, her voice gentle, warm. Soon Ethan drifted into peaceful sleep, his tiny hand still locked around hers. Outside the door, Jonathan stood silently, watching the scene. His heart tightened. After so much loss, it was the first time he saw his son truly smile again, and it was because of Sophia. 2 days after the accident, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. Jonathan brought his son back to the penthouse at Riverside Heights, where the vast rooms had felt unbearably empty since his wife's passing. From the moment they arrived home, Ethan kept asking, "Daddy, is Miss Sophia coming? She promised to tell me another story." Jonathan sighed. He knew his son was attached to the young woman. Part of him was infinitely grateful, yet another part felt uneasy. Still, he couldn't deny the hope in his little boy's eyes. That afternoon, Jonathan called Sophia. "I know this may be inconvenient, but Ethan keeps asking for you. Could you come by?" Sophia hesitated. I'm not sure I should." "Please, he already lost his mother. You're the only one who's made him smile again." Her heart softened. She agreed. That evening, when Sophia stepped into the elegant apartment, Ethan ran toward her, eyes shining. "Miss Sophia, please tell the story about the little bear again." Sophia laughed, sitting beside him, her warm hands ruffling his sweat-dampened hair. Jonathan stood at a distance, quietly observing. He had never seen his son cling to anyone but his late mother. In the days that followed, the bond only deepened. Ethan began eating better, the nightmares faded. Before bed, he always asked, "Daddy, is Miss Sophia free? I want her to read me a story." Jonathan came to realize Sophia's presence was the emotional medicine his son desperately needed. But not everyone saw it that way. Jonathan's father, Richard Miller, a wealthy and stern businessman, visited his grandson that weekend. He frowned the moment he saw Sophia sitting on the sofa, reading to Ethan, the boy pressed close against her side. "Jonathan," Richard said in a gravelly, cold voice, "who is this woman?" Jonathan replied, "This is Sophia. She's the one who saved Ethan." Richard's eyes swept over her from head to toe. The plain uniform, hair tied back neatly, her face still marked with fatigue. He gave a small nod, but his gaze dripped with disdain. "I know what you did, and our family is grateful, but from here it must end. Someone like you has no place in the Miller family." The words cut like a knife. Sophia clenched her fists, holding back tears. Ethan looked up, bewildered. "Grandpa, why did you say that? Miss Sophia is my friend." Richard's face hardened. "You don't understand, boy. Adults have matters you cannot grasp." Jonathan turned to his father, his voice tight with restraint. "Enough, Dad. Sophia is my son's savior, and Ethan needs her." But Richard replied coldly, "A savior should remain nothing more than a memory of gratitude. Cross the line, and it becomes a problem." Sophia rose, bowing her head. "Excuse me, I should leave." Ethan grabbed her hand desperately. "Don't go. I want you to stay." The sight wrenched Sophia's heart. She bent down, hugging him. "I'll always be here when you need me, but tonight you should rest." The boy's eyes welled with tears as he nodded, letting her go. Jonathan walked Sophia to the door. He whispered, almost like a promise, "Don't listen to my father. Ethan needs you, and so do I." Sophia gave a faint smile, saying nothing. But deep inside, she knew her bond with the boy had grown far beyond what anyone could dismiss as just gratitude. After the tense encounter at the penthouse, Richard Miller couldn't erase from his mind the image of his grandson clinging tightly to Sophia, as if she were the only person in the world he trusted. He felt insulted. The Miller family, with its long-standing reputation and wealth, was not a place for an ordinary cleaning woman to belong. Richard sat in his luxurious office, fingers tapping on the walnut desk, his eyes cold and sharp. This must end. now. The next day, he arranged to meet Sophia in the service area of Riverside Heights. Spotting her mopping the hallway, Richard strode over, his voice low and icy. "Miss Sophia, we need to talk." Sophia set the mop aside, her heart racing. "Yes, Mr. Miller? I know you saved my grandson, and I am grateful. But now you're overstepping. You're filling the boy's head with illusions. He lost his mother, he clings easily, and you're exploiting that." Sophia shook her head, tears welling up. "No, I would never exploit Ethan. I only want him not to feel alone." Richard smirked with disdain. "People like you always say that, but I've lived long enough to know better. The poor often see wealthy families as a ticket out. You may fool the boy, even my son, but you will never fool me." Sophia froze, his words stabbing deep into her chest. Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping into a threat. "If you truly care about Ethan, disappear. Stay away from my family. Otherwise, you'll regret it." Sophia swallowed hard, saying nothing. When he left, her hands trembled. But deep down, she knew Ethan needed her. In the days that followed, Richard set his plan into motion. He called a journalist friend, hinting at a scandalous story about opportunists pretending to be heroes to infiltrate wealthy families. "No need for names," Richard said. "Just write it so people can guess. Trust me, the residents will know exactly who it is." The article soon appeared on a popular society blog titled "New Trick, Unsung Hero, or Calculated Opportunist." It described a plain employee who had used gratitude after an accident to insinuate herself into an elite family. Though no name was mentioned, everyone in Riverside Heights knew it was about Sophia. The very next day, the atmosphere shifted. As Sophia entered the lobby, she felt the stares, heard the whispers. "Is it her? They say she even uses the child." Sophia lowered her head, forcing herself to keep working, but each step felt heavy with shame. That afternoon, Jonathan called her aside in a quiet hallway. "Sophia, I read that article. I know it's all lies. But are you all right?" Sophia pressed her lips together. "It's been hard, Mr. Jonathan. Everyone looks at me like I'm some kind of monster. I don't want Ethan to suffer because of me." Jonathan's hands clenched, his voice resolute. "I won't let anyone harm you, and I won't let anyone tear you away from my son." Sophia looked at him, seeing that steady determination for the first time. It reassured her, yet it also made her heart tremble. But Richard wasn't finished. He knew the article was only the beginning. One evening in the grand dining room of the Miller estate, Richard spoke bluntly to Jonathan. "Son, it's time to choose. Family, career, honor, or a meaningless cleaning woman." Jonathan set down his glass of wine, his eyes locked on his father. "You're wrong, Dad. It's you who's destroying this family's honor, not her." Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with fury. But he knew. This battle was far from over. Sophia hadn't been able to sleep for many nights. The rumors, the fabricated article, and the suspicious stares of neighbors weighed heavily on her. Yet every time she thought of Ethan's smile, she found strength again. One evening, after finishing her shift, she was putting away her cleaning supplies when Jonathan appeared. He wore a white shirt, his tie loosened, looking tired, but with determination burning in his eyes. "Sophia, will you walk with me for a bit?" Jonathan asked. They strolled through the small garden behind the condominium. The rain had just stopped, leaving droplets shimmering on the leaves under the golden lights. Jonathan halted, turning to face her. "Sophia, I know my father has been pressuring you, but I want you to know one thing. I trust you, completely." His voice was calm and steady, so different from the tension he carried when confronting his father. Sophia shook her head, her voice breaking. "But Mr. Richard, he'll never accept me. And I'm afraid Ethan will suffer more because of me." Jonathan stepped closer, narrowing the space between them to only a few inches. "Ethan needs you, and so do I." Sophia's heart pounded wildly. She had never heard such words from him. The sincerity in his gaze made it impossible for her to look away. "Jonathan," she whispered. He gently took her hand, warm and steady. "I don't care what people say. All I know is that since you entered our lives, Ethan has smiled again. And so have I. I don't want to lose that." Hot tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks, not of pain, but of a happiness laced with fear. "I'm afraid that one day it will all disappear." Jonathan shook his head, whispering like a vow. "No, I won't let that happen. Even if I must stand against the whole world, I'll protect you and Ethan." In that moment, Sophia's defenses crumbled. She let her heart lead, resting her head against his chest. Jonathan wrapped his arms around her, tight and reverent, as though he feared she might vanish if he let go. Around them, the city carried on with its noise, but in that little garden, only two hearts existed, finding each other in the middle of chaos. The brief happiness Sophia and Jonathan had found was quickly overshadowed by a new storm. After witnessing the growing closeness between them, Richard decided to strike with his deadliest move. He knew that to rip Sophia from his son and grandson's life, he had to destroy her reputation. One morning, Richard called the building manager, his tone calm but razor-sharp. "We've received a report of a missing item from a residence. Under building policy, we'll conduct a locker inspection, discreetly and with witnesses." The manager hesitated, but under pressure from Richard, one of the building's biggest investors, he reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Richard carried out the next step. He quietly handed a small velvet box to a female janitor who was struggling financially. "Keep this in your locker for a few days. Don't open it, just hold on to it. Later, I'll help pay for your daughter's hospital bills." The woman, touched and unsuspecting, agreed. But Richard wasn't finished. That same afternoon, while Sophia stepped away to clean the corridor, he slipped into the staff room and carefully placed another box, this one containing a diamond necklace that had once belonged to his late wife, inside Sophia's locker. A wicked smile tugged at his lips. "This time, you won't escape," he muttered. The next day, the manager gathered all the cleaning staff. Jonathan was present too, because Richard had, coincidentally, asked him to witness the process. "We have to check the lockers. A valuable item has gone missing from one of the apartments," the building manager announced. The workers muttered in protest, but no one dared resist. Lockers were opened one by one, nothing unusual, until they reached Sophia's. The door swung open. A velvet box gleamed inside. The manager opened it, and the room fell silent. A diamond necklace sparkled under the fluorescent lights. "This is my late wife's necklace," Richard exclaimed, feigning horror. Every eye turned to Sophia. She froze, her face pale. "No, it's not mine. I've never seen it before." Ethan, who had been with his father, burst into tears. "No, Miss Sophia didn't do it. She's good." Jonathan stood stunned, staring at the evidence. His heart trusted Sophia, but his mind reeled. Richard seized the moment. "Manager, call the police. Stealing from the Miller family is a serious crime." Sophia sobbed, locking eyes with Jonathan. "You have to believe me. I didn't do it. Someone set me up." Jonathan searched her gaze and found no trace of deceit, only desperation and pain. He turned to his father, voice sharp as steel. "Father, this is your doing, isn't it?" Richard scowled, feigning outrage. "You dare accuse your own father? The evidence is right there." Jonathan stepped closer, pointing at the necklace. "Too perfect, too timely. I know you. This reeks of one of your schemes." The air was suffocating with tension. Ethan clung to Sophia's hand, sobbing. I believe you! I believe you!" Then, from the back of the room, the woman Richard had bribed stepped forward, trembling. I have to tell the truth. Mr. Richard asked me to keep a box for him. He said it was a surprise for Jonathan. But now, I don't know what to think." Gasps rippled through the room. Jonathan whipped around to face his father. Richard faltered for a moment before regaining composure, but the cracks in his authority had already begun to show. Sophia nearly collapsed, but Jonathan caught her, his voice firm. "I believe you. Even if the whole world turns against you, I still believe." Ethan nodded fiercely, hugging Sophia tightly. "I know you didn't do anything wrong." Richard remained silent, his eyes dark like a predator cornered. He knew this plan hadn't played out as he intended. But the war wasn't over yet. A week after the turmoil, Jonathan realized that hiding would only make things worse. Richard would never stop unless he faced him head-on. One afternoon, as Sophia finished her shift, Jonathan came to pick her up. But instead of driving toward his apartment, he steered the car straight toward the grand mansion on the hill, his father's home. Sophia grew nervous. "Jonathan, where are we going?" His grip on the wheel tightened, his eyes unwavering. "To see my father. It's time I make things clear. I won't let you suffer in the shadows any longer." Her heart pounded. She had faced Richard's contempt once before, and the wound still stung. But Jonathan's gaze was steady, resolute. The heavy iron gate swung open. The old butler led them into the vast living room where Richard sat with a glass of red wine. His eyes sharpened the moment they landed on Sophia. "Well, what a surprise," Richard said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "My son decided to bring this special guest into my house?" Sophia instinctively tried to step back, but Jonathan caught her hand and pulled her forward firmly. "Father," Jonathan began, his voice calm yet resolute. "I'm not here to ask for permission. I'm here to make it clear. Sophia is the woman I love. She matters to me, and she matters to Ethan. And no matter what you say, we will not part." Richard slammed his glass onto the table, the sharp sound echoing. His face darkened with rage. "My son," he growled, "you are throwing away everything for a janitor. Do you think society will respect you when they see you hand in hand with someone of her kind? You are dragging this family's name through the mud." Jonathan squeezed Sophia's hand tighter, meeting his father's glare. "What name? The one built on arrogance and contempt? I don't need it. What I need is a real family, and Sophia has given me that." Richard shot to his feet, the chair screeching behind him. He jabbed a finger toward his son. "If you don't end this relationship right now, don't expect to keep your position in the company. Don't expect a penny of inheritance. I will erase your name from everything." Sophia trembled, but Jonathan stood tall. He drew a deep breath, then spoke firmly. "If the price of keeping Sophia is losing money and power, I'll pay it. I can rebuild from nothing, but if I lose her, I lose everything." Silence engulfed the room. Sophia looked at Jonathan, tears glistening in her eyes. She had never been defended like this. Richard took a step back, shock and fury flickering in his eyes. His obedient son, the one who always followed his plans, now stood tall against him. "You'll regret this," Richard muttered, his words like knives. Jonathan shook his head. "No, Father. What I regret is letting you control my life for so long. From today on, I'll live my own way." He gently wrapped his arm around Sophia, a silent declaration. Richard's fists clenched, his knuckles pale, but he said no more. He simply stood there, watching as the two walked out of the mansion, carrying with them defiance, courage, and an unshakable love. On the way back, Sophia's voice trembled. You'd really give up everything for me?" Jonathan smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'm not giving anything up, Sophia. I'm simply choosing what my heart refuses to lose." And for the first time, Sophia believed their love could withstand any storm. After the fierce confrontation at the mansion, Jonathan and Sophia stepped into the cold night air. For the first time, Jonathan had stood before his father and declared, "This love could not be destroyed." Days later, Jonathan knew it was time not just to protect Sophia, but to give her a permanent place in his life. That evening, he took Sophia and Ethan to a quiet park on a hill overlooking the city lights. Ethan played nearby, his laughter ringing, while Jonathan held Sophia's hand, his eyes full of resolve. "Sophia," he began, voice steady, "you walked into my life like a fire. You didn't just save Ethan, you saved me. I don't want to just thank you anymore. I want to build a family with you, for Ethan, for us." He dropped to one knee and pulled out a small ring that gleamed under the lamplight. "Will you marry me, Sophia?" Sophia froze. Memories of contempt, humiliation, and pressure flooded her mind. But before her stood Jonathan's earnest gaze, and behind him, Ethan's pure laughter. Tears welled up, and she nodded. "Yes, Jonathan, I will." Ethan squealed, running into their arms. "Really? Now I'll have a whole family, right? A real mom?" Jonathan hugged his son, then pulled Sophia close, the three of them wrapped together. "Yes, Ethan, from now on, we'll be a family." Joy radiated, washing away past pain. But elsewhere, Richard sat alone in his vast, dimly lit room, the amber glow highlighting his aging, rigid face. He remembered his son's defiance, Sophia's wounded yet unbroken eyes. He had won many battles in life, but this time he was the loser. And this loss left not anger, but emptiness. The next day, Richard appeared unexpectedly at Jonathan's apartment. Sophia stiffened. Ethan clung to his father. The heavy silence broke when Richard spoke. "I didn't come to argue. I know I was wrong." Jonathan frowned, not quick to trust. Sophia stayed quiet. Richard's voice was hoarse. "I let pride and prejudice blind me. I hurt you, and I hurt you too, Sophia. I can't change overnight, but I promise I won't sabotage you again." Sophia lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. Jonathan studied his father, torn between anger and pity. At last he nodded slightly. "We don't need your blessing. We just need you to leave us in peace." Richard was silent for a long moment, then said softly, "I can do that." Ethan suddenly stepped forward, looking up with innocent eyes. "Grandpa, you won't make Mom Sophia cry again, right?" The child's question made Richard falter. For a moment, his cold eyes softened. He bent slightly and murmured, "No, I won't." No one believed Richard had truly changed, but the iron wall he built around himself had cracked. Weeks later, the engagement was held simply, with only those who truly mattered. Ethan was the happiest of all, running around proudly telling everyone he had a new mom. Sophia smiled, though a flicker of unease lingered. Would the past truly release them? Jonathan squeezed her hand, whispering, "The storm has passed, Sophia. Now it's our turn to build peace." The wedding day came sooner than Jonathan and Sophia had imagined. There were no lavish decorations, no five-star hotel banquet, just a simple ceremony in the small neighborhood church where Sophia had grown up. That morning, golden sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, bathing the chapel in warm colors. Close friends, neighbors, colleagues, and those who truly cared for them filled the pews. Not many guests, but each brought genuine joy. Sophia wore a plain white dress with little jewelry, yet when she walked down the aisle, every gaze turned toward her. Jonathan, in a sharp blue suit, never took his eyes off the woman who had changed his life. Down the aisle, Ethan walked carefully, holding the ring box. His smile beamed, his eyes shining like stars. As he reached Jonathan and Sophia, he lifted his chin and shouted loud enough for all to hear, "Mom, I brought the rings!" The word "mom" slipped out so naturally it nearly made Sophia cry. Her eyes blurred with tears, but her smile glowed even brighter. Jonathan placed a hand on his son's shoulder and whispered, "Well done, Ethan." The vows were solemn yet intimate. When the priest asked Jonathan if he promised to stand by Sophia for life, his voice rang firm. "I do." When it was Sophia's turn, her voice trembled but was resolute. "I do." Applause filled the chapel, mingling with the organ's melody. Jonathan kissed Sophia's lips as everyone watched. Ethan jumped in excitement, clapping and shouting, "Yay! Now I really have a mom!" Laughter, clapping, and joyful tears glistened across the small church. At the back pew, Richard sat quietly. He wore a dark suit, his hands tightening and loosening again and again. His eyes followed his son, his grandson, and the woman he had once tried so hard to drive away. Amid the music and Ethan's radiant smile, Richard realized all the power, money, and cruel schemes meant nothing before love and courage. He had lost, but for the first time he understood that losing did not mean he had nothing left. After the ceremony, as everyone gathered around simple tables adorned with wildflowers and a modest cake, Ethan ran to Richard and tugged his hand. "Grandpa, now you have Mom Sophia too, just like me." Richard blinked, surprised, then nodded softly. Inside him, an emptiness that had long lingered seemed to ease. As night fell, Sophia and Jonathan stepped outside the church, hand in hand. Ethan ran ahead, laughing. Above them, stars glittered like witnesses to a new beginning. The story closed not with grandeur, but with a small family full of love. They had overcome prejudice, power, and control. And they had triumphed, not with force, but with truth, patience, and a courage that chose love over control.